Alright, the long-awaited speculation video that I promised that maybe two people were excited for is finally here. Now, like always, I'm going to give the audience who hasn't seen episode 6 or up to episode 6 10 seconds to click off the video so that they don't see any spoilers. Alright, that was your 10 seconds. Before I get started on what I think will happen in episodes 7 and 8, let's talk about some events that may occur before I fit them into the overall story, or at least what I think is the overall story. I'm not Matt Pat, I'm not gonna guarantee anything. Let's start off with a popular theory: En killed Nori. I personally don't see this really affecting the story, maybe the romance, but not much else. Uzi knows that Ennis killed workers before, and she hardly knows her mother as she died when she was an untrained neural network or baby, however you want to put it. The only way I can see this actually affecting Uzi is if she learns about Nori's death through her connection of the Absolute Solver, and then meets a similar fate at the hands of N. So it would give her this idea that N hasn't changed. That might build some distrust, but still, I don't see it being hugely drastic given the circumstance. You can see my point though. Uzi won't be mad at N for the past, but may feel conflicted for repeating what she would consider past mistakes, wanting to get away from him or at the very least no longer trusting him. Now, N will kill Uzi because Tessa will peer pressure him into doing it or convince him to do it. Because in episode 6, for those who missed it, Tessa said,
I'm here to find which drones were infected. When we get to the labs and find that list, I'll need you to choose the universe over one little drone, N, before she's not herself anymore.
You can see the point I'm trying to make. But with that being said, we're going to move on to the next topic and come back to this when talking about episode 7. I've already made an 8-minute video about how V is coming back, as well as what her fate will be through multiple videos. So if you want to check those out, you can go check those out on my YouTube channel. But for those who haven't seen it, I'm just going to give you a quick summary. But if you want more on that topic, or if you want evidence, I'm not going to include it. I'm just going to review what my conclusion was. I think V is going to come back as an Elder Lich because Alice and Bo are no longer alive to remove the corrupted cores, which they've been doing for all the other assembly drones. And if they were moving the cores to stop the Elder Liches from coming, that kind of proves that the Sentinels are incapable of destroying the corrupted cores. So she's coming back, most likely. Or she's coming back as a monster that might not actually help our team. Regardless, she's coming back different. Let's just say that. Ah, yes, the next topic is shipping, which is both liked and hated by the community. Now, one previously mentioned viewer isn't gonna like what I have to say. So, I don't think that ships will progress any further for the remainder of Season 1. En is traumatized, Uzi is corrupted, and there is simply too much on both their plates for anything to reasonably progress. Maybe next season, if there is another season, but not this season. The only thing I could see happening in the next two episodes is En sharing a very touching moment with Uzi before he comes to the decision of killing her because of Tessa pressuring him into it or convincing him of it. Of course, he wouldn't know that there's a cure or some way of saving her. This would all be done out of ignorance of potential ways of helping her. So, something to think about. Another thing we all have to consider is the way Liam writes his stories. I'm sure many of you have seen his animations, but I don't know how many of you have seen his stories that he wrote for Scary Story Time with Liam. He has another channel, and he basically tells you these full-fledged stories, and a lot of them have tragic endings. So we might see a repeat here with Murder Drones. So the whole will they, won't they thing may devolve into a tragic ending rather than a happy ending. Actually, what am I even saying? There's no such thing as a happy ending when it comes to Liam. It's it's almost always tragedy. But with that, let's move on. Now, before I talk about episode 7, there's one more thing we have to consider. Whether or not Nori is alive. The elusive designation S, and last I checked, Eldritch J was still at Camp 98.7. So, why is this important? Well, it's important because of this. Anyway, Uzi will receive unlikely aid, meaning a former enemy or people you don't expect. So, someone who dislikes Uzi, someone we have never met, something like that. Then there is angst overload, temptation, and so on. Knowing this, let's now talk about episode 7. In the 7th episode, Tessa, N, and Uzi will start off or wake up at the bottom of the elevator shaft. Uzi, with the goal of finding answers surrounding her mother, will push herself to explore, but will fail to get far on her own given her condition. The unlikely ally here will be Tessa. Tessa wants Uzi dead because she has the absolute solver, however, she's going to help Uzi in the interest of acquiring the list she mentioned in episode 6. She also wants to convince N that she knows best for Uzi. Over time, Uzi is going to get worse and may overload, like she did in episode 4. As a result, she may get the temptation to kill Tessa and maybe even N, depending on how much the solver grabs hold of her. As a result, N may have to kill her to protect Tessa, believing it's for the best, thinking that Uzi was already gone, thanks to Tessa. N and Tessa will then move on to the next area, finding the list but also Doll. Here is where N conveniently learns that there was a way to fix Uzi. Doll, originally mentioned in the 3rd episode.
Жаль. Если я найду то, что ищу, то и тебе помогу. What?
We also learn in episode 6 that Nori went full Elderlich, but was normal by the time the planet's core collapsed. And if she did die, then she was unable to fight back using the Absolute Solver, because as you know, workers with the Absolute Solver can beat a disassembly drone or the very least escape one. When N learns about this, he will snap back at Tessa, turning the scenario into a Mexican standoff, which is basically a free-for-all. Only for Uzi to come back, though, same way Doll did in episode 3. Doll, N, and Tessa will team up, fight against corrupted Uzi, with Doll and N working together. They will be able to administer the solution to Uzi's corruption, saving Uzi. N and Doll will be standing in close proximity to one another as they just work together to save Uzi, while Uzi is going to be out in the open. When Uzi returns to normal, she would address the situation based on her current feelings. Regardless, she would probably call out to N and approach him, only to be shot in the head by Tessa. That is where episode 7 will end. Tessa shot Uzi as she doesn't trust this solution, or she's still skeptical, she's not taking the risk, so on. Tessa seems to be very much a utilitarian. She wants to do what's best for the majority rather than the minority, which makes sense where N just cares more about Uzi. So it would fit in quite nicely there. Before going to the next episode, let's talk about Thad, Lizzie, and Sin. Thad and Lizzie are both essential characters to the future events in the show. We know this because of the way they were set up. Thad is introduced as someone we can sympathize with, and in episode 2, he plays a part for most of the episode and survives where most die. The same event occurs with Lizzie, but starting in episode 3. We originally don't like Lizzie, but later can sympathize with her after she shows that she cares about V and tries to save her. And in episode 4, she plays a much bigger part and survives where others die. You don't go out of your way to keep characters alive unless they're needed for the plot later. Then there's Sin. In episode 6, Tessa confirms that Sin isn't the Absolute Solver. The Absolute Solver chose her to act as a host.
We know it mutates in damaged AI. It took Sin as a host, then it took everything.
This seems to be a similar setup to what we saw with Nori and what we're seeing with Uzi. My guess is that the Absolute Solver chooses a new host when it sets its sights on a new planet. Sin was used to destroy Earth. However, Nori was infected and became an Elderlich, even sporting the same yellow eyes. This could mean that Nori, like Sin, was going to be used to destroy Copper 9. It should be noted that the efforts of killing the human population, building the spires, and accessing the Cabin Fever labs takes time. It would not go unnoticed. Which leads me to the question, are they needed for the Absolute Solver to destroy planets? My guess is that they're not. Not only did the Cabin Fever labs at the time not serve the purpose they do now, but the humans of Copper 9 did not know of the Absolute Solver until Earth's destruction, mentioned by Tessa.
The humans who saw what was happening at home thought they could understand it. All they did was spread it.
So, Sin isn't the Absolute Solver, yet seems to be giving orders. My guess is after Earth's destructions, Sin's Absolute Solver disconnected when she was destroyed, but survived in the cloud of the disassembly network. It's a good time to note that Sin in the flashback controlled the drones of the manor, so why is she controlling the disassembly drones now, since they're acting against her while under her administration? That is, unless they're not going against her wishes and are unknowingly helping her in dealing with the Absolute Solver. Another thing to note is when Sin was Elderlich J, she didn't use the Absolute Solver like she did in the flashback as an Elderlich at Elliot's Manor. Now back to Nori. Assuming she was going to be used by the Absolute Solver to destroy Copper 9 could be factored into a plan in stopping the Absolute Solver, such as tricking the Absolute Solver into thinking the planet is dead, resulting in the Absolute Solver abilities being removed in the drones on the planet. In other words, Sin could interfere through use of a backdoor into the Absolute Solver and tamper with Nori's output of power, resulting in a controlled core collapse rather than Copper 9's destruction. So Uzi could be saved by Sin interfering with the Absolute Solver's plans once again. Now on to Episode 8. Before I start on Episode 8, I would like to point out that the season finale will probably be 30 minutes to an hour long. Now, Episode 8 will pick off most likely where 7 ends, and N will confront Tessa, only to realize that she had no intentions of saving Uzi, as she considers all drones of the Absolute Solver a threat. Dahl and N in response will team up to face Tessa, which will force Tessa to retreat. Any foe that were a problem when they entered the Cabin Fever labs will probably have died at the hands of Elderlich Uzi when they were tracking them down. So Tessa will be able to escape with ease, making it to the elevator shaft, where she'll be able to scale the elevator shaft. And unfortunately for N, his wings might be a little too big, or in terms of span at least, for the elevator shaft, which will give Tessa the upper hand in escaping them. She might also annoyingly have a convenient grappling hook gun that allows her to get ahead, that for whatever reason didn't show up till now. Dahl and N will pursue close in her tail, but when they reach the top of the elevator shaft, they're going to be met with a very different sight than expected. A hallway covered in oil and broken sentinels. They see Tessa and call out to her. She tells them to shut up, but it's already too late, as an Elderlich monstrosity appears from the shadows and proceeds to attempt to kill the three of them. They then have to work together to reach the surface and escape the Elderlich horror. Once they reach the surface, shortly after, Dahl is shot in the head and plummets back into the labs from the surface. This leads to a dispute with N and Tessa, but it's cut short when Jay grabs Tessa and flies away. It would be at this point that N is all alone and doesn't know what to do. In fact, because he has no one around him and because he's lost everyone he cared about or feels betrayed by those who are still alive, he may just freeze up. I don't mean physically freeze, I mean as a computer, his program might freeze up and he just may stand there doing nothing. And that's where the show could end. Or at least that's where Season 1 will end. And I'll continue and do an introduction on Season 2 regardless, so you can see my thought process of how this is going to play out. Alright, Season 2 prediction. Season 2 will start differently. We'll get a glimpse of N broken mentally, not moving, with snow piling up on him. right where he was at the end of season 1, implying a time skip with no change to N. The show would later introduce two new main characters, Thad and Lizzie, who were previously side characters. Thad becomes worried about Uzi and the disassembly drones after not returning after a year. People will start going missing, like in episode 2, so Thad investigates with Lizzie. Thad and Lizzie discover that Tessa and Jay are killing drones in the colony. Thad warns Khan, who puts the facility in lockdown. However, as time passes and portions of the bunker are breached, Thad decides to leave the bunker to find Uzi and the disassembly drones in hope of stopping Tessa and Jay. Lizzie, losing most of her friends, reluctantly joins Thad in his journey. The two set out to Camp 98.7, the one place they know of that Uzi went to for answers outside of the bunker. When they arrive, something watches over them from the shadows. They explore, and as they explore, Rebecca grabs Lizzie's leg before shutting down again. They later find N and have an interaction explaining what had just happened. This gives N hope that Uzi is still alive in Cabin Fever Labs and ventures down with Thad and Lizzie. They find the irregular Elder Lich again, which turns out to be V, but something's different. They avoid her and go down the elevator shaft to Uzi's body, only to find it's missing. In fact, they didn't see Doll's body either. It's later that they find out that Elder Lich V consumed them both. However, it's important to note that Uzi is the administrator of V and N, so she technically could survive in the cloud between them, even if she dies. In fact, I'm pretty sure getting consumed does actually store the programming, so Doll may actually be able to come back too. But this is kind of the idea I'm building off of, where N gets hope, loses hope, finds hope again. Maybe we can get them to what they want to get to. But that's as far as I'm going to go in speculation for season 2. Because bringing Uzi back and bringing Doll back is a whole nother question. Because Uzi is one of the more beloved characters. I mean, N is right there at the top. So seeing him in such a state would be bad enough as it is. And losing Uzi could be a tragic moment as well, only for V to return as a monster that killed her. And if you've listened to the lyrics of Eternal Dreams, which is like an homage to V, it actually explains that V lost the will to live, that she thought the life she was living as a disassembly drone was a dream, how she wants to end the dream, but she can't, which only adds more fuel to the fire of tragedy that would be the scenario. Now that we've talked about episode 7, 8, and where season 2 may start, let's talk about a few lingering ideas I just want to get out there. So, I think Sin is using the worker drones in a plot against the Absolute Solver. In fact, I think she wants the spires and the contents of Cabin Fever Labs to lock the Absolute Solver out of the drones on Copper 9 by using the spires to act as like antennas, uploading them with a program meant to fight any of the Absolute Solver's attempts to infect the drones of Copper 9, and that's where I'll stop with that idea. Liam himself has actually said everyone dies in the end, but the protagonist's journey points out that that is just a part of the process, and it is followed by rebirth. Now we know that Uzi is the administrator of NNV, but something that I covered in a previous video is that the administrator may actually become part of the Elder Lich. So while it could be 70% V, it may be 30% Uzi, which means she may survive either way. Just another thing to get out there. In the video I did that in was Everybody Dies. I'll actually leave a link to that in the description, as well as my V video, why she's coming back. Alternatively, I'm going to throw this idea out there that could stick regardless of what happens. So let's hypothetically say, because Uzi is the administrator of V, that she does not come back to life. And she just kind of sits there dead. However, it could be in the future that she does come back to life when Uzi dies, because Uzi becomes part of the cloud and hops over to V, which activates the process. So V might just be like the +1 life that Uzi gets that just sits there. it's an idea. It's an idea that we'll have to return to at another time. And that's it. And with that, I would like to thank you all for watching. My next video will be on the teaser that comes out before the next video, so keep a lookout for that, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you all next time.